You are standing in the dairy aisle, reaching for a carton that says milk. You trust that word. You assume whatever is inside came out of a cow and went into that carton with as little happening in between as possible. But here is the part the label never mentions. That milk has been heated to 280 degrees Fahrenheit, pushed through industrial membranes, taken apart into water, fat, sugar, and protein, and then rebuilt. And under United States law, it still gets to be called milk. Today, we walk the dairy aisle together. 7 kinds of milk that sit much further from the cow than the label lets on, counting down to the most engineered of them all. And then the 4 that are still, by any honest measure, actually milk. Pasteurization saved lives. In 1912, Chicago became the first city to require it after milk killed thousands with typhoid and tuberculosis. The standard method your grandparents drank heats milk to 161 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds, high temperature, short time, barely touching the milk at all. But the same 1924 rulebook that made milk safe also left the definition wide open. It says milk may be pasteurized or ultra-pasteurized. It says you may add cream, concentrated milk, dry whole milk, or non-fat dry milk and still call it milk. Every one of those allowances was written for a good reason. But stacked on top of each other, they created room for a kind of milk those men could never have pictured. Milk taken apart by machines and built back up again. So let us count them down. Numbers 7, 6, and 5 are all about heat. Start with the 2 big organic names in every supermarket cold case, Horizon Organic and Organic Valley. Both are ultra pasteurized, meaning they are flash heated to 280 degrees or higher, far beyond the 161 degrees that standard pasteurization requires. That extreme heat kills not just harmful bacteria, but spoilage bacteria too, which is why a carton of Horizon can sit in your fridge for 60 days instead of 3 weeks. The same treatment, pushed even further, gives you shelf-stable milk, the Parmalat boxes, and the aseptic Horizon and Organic Valley cartons that sit on a dry pantry shelf for 6 months without ever seeing a refrigerator. The trade is small but real. The higher heat caramelizes a little of the milk sugar, leaving a faintly cooked, slightly sweet flavor. It also changes the whey proteins enough that you cannot make cheese from ultra-pasteurized milk, because the heat-damaged proteins will not form proper curds. It is still whole milk from a cow, just cooked far harder than it needs to be for safety. And the reason it is almost always organic milk getting this treatment is distance. Organic dairy farms are fewer and farther apart than conventional ones, so the milk has to survive a cross-country trip, sometimes 2,000 miles, to reach a store. Ultra-pasteurization is not a conspiracy. It is the only way that business model works. Number 4 adds things the cow view never made. Fortified milk, cartons like Horizon Organic DH, A omega-3, promising extra omega-3 fatty acids, and DHA to support growing brains and eye development. If you flip the carton over and read the fine print, that DHA comes from algal oil, oil pressed from algae farmed in industrial tanks, then emulsified and blended into the milk after pasteurization. The algae is real, the DHA is real, but it was never anywhere near a cow. And here is the quiet part. The law never required any of this fortification in the first place. Even the vitamin A and vitamin D that you assume are naturally in every carton of milk are optional under FDA rules. Added by choice, not mandate. The milk underneath is real dairy. But what is advertised on the front of the carton, the headline benefit that justifies the higher price, came from a tank, not a pasture. Number 3 quietly rebuilds the sugar. Lactose-free milk, the household name being Lactaid, made for the roughly 2 out of 3 adults on Earth whose bodies stop producing enough lactase enzyme to digest milk sugar after childhood. Lactaid and its competitors start with regular milk, almost always ultra-pasteurized first for shelf life, and then they dose it with lactase enzyme before it ever reaches the carton. The enzyme does the work your gut would normally do, breaking lactose, a double sugar, into glucose and galactose, two simpler sugars that taste sweeter on the tongue. That is why lactate tastes noticeably sweeter than the regular milk it started as, even though nothing sweet was added. The sugar was always there. It just got split apart for you before you bought it. Nothing sinister about it, but the chemistry in your glass has already happened, and it happened in a tank, not in your stomach. Number 2 concentrates the protein. The high-protein milks lining the cold case next to sports drinks, promising 30 grams of protein per bottle instead of the usual 13 grams per cup. Some of them reach that number through filtration, straining out water and lactose to concentrate what is left, a process that starts to blur into ultrafiltration, which we will get to in a moment. But there is another, quieter route buried in the FDA rulebook. Milk can legally include non-fat dry milk, which is exactly what it sounds like. Milk that was dried into powder and then reconstituted with water and folded back in. The added powder boosts the protein count without requiring any new label or any disclosure beyond a line in the ingredient list that most shoppers will never read. You will almost never see it advertised because it does not sound like something anyone would brag about. But it is legal, it is cheap, and the label is only required to list it, never to explain it. For the most part, if you see a bottle screaming high protein on a shelf, it is either this or it is what comes next. And number 1 is the most engineered milk on any shelf in America, ultra-filtered milk. And if you are holding a bottle of it, the brand is almost certainly Fairlife. Fairlife is owned by Coca-Cola, and it sells over $1 billion of milk a year using a process that was originally developed for pharmaceutical and industrial applications, not food. Here is how it works. Fresh milk arrives at the plant in a refrigerated tanker. It is chilled further and then pushed under pressure through a series of ever finer ceramic and polymer membranes, each one with microscopic pores that sort molecules by size. The milk separates into 5 streams: water, fat, protein, lactose, and minerals, each one collected in its own tank. Then, in a controlled blending room, it is reassembled. The protein stream is concentrated and added back, boosting the count. Most of the lactose stream is discarded, slashing the sugar. Calcium is adjusted upward by about 30%. A dose of lactase enzyme is added to break down whatever lactose remains, making the final product completely lactose-free. The result is a liquid that carries 80% casein and 20% whey, the same ratio as human breast milk, with 50% more protein and 50% less sugar than the milk that entered the building. Fairlife is careful to note it never adds protein from an outside source. Every gram of protein in the bottle was already in the milk. They just disassembled the milk, measured everything, threw some of it away, and put the rest back together in proportions that nature never poured. From the moment the tanker arrives to the moment the cap gets screwed on, the entire process takes less than 48 hours. In 2 days, milk is chilled, split into 5 molecular fractions, measured by computer, recombined in a new ratio, dosed with enzyme, and sealed into a bottle that will sit on a shelf for 90 days. It is a genuine feat of food science and chemical engineering. It is also about as far from a bucket under a cow as a glass of milk has ever traveled. Here is where the story flips. It would be easy to walk away from all 7 of those thinking you have been tricked. You have not. Every one of those cartons is still real dairy, still milk that came from a cow, and every bit of that processing exists for a reason that genuinely helps somebody. Ultra-pasteurization is not a scam. It is the only way organic milk from a handful of far-apart farms can survive a 2,000-mile trip and still be safe to drink. Shelf-stable boxes feed families with no refrigerator and soldiers a long way from home. Lactose-free milk lets 2/3 of the planet drink a glass without paying for it an hour later. And ultra-filtered milk hands an athlete 30 grams of protein in a glass that used to hold 13. None of that is a con. It is engineering quietly solving real problems. But engineering is a choice, and so is the opposite. Which brings us to the 4 milks, that never wandered very far from the cow at all. The first is the plainest carton in the aisle, ordinary whole milk that only ever saw standard pasteurization, 161 degrees, 15 seconds, and nothing else. Look for cartons from local dairies or regional brands that simply say pasteurized with no ultra prefix, no added vitamins advertised, no protein claims. The flavor and the proteins are left almost exactly as the cow made them. The second is creamline milk, also called non-homogenized, brands like Kelowna Supernatural being one of the few you can find in multiple states. Because it is never blended under pressure, the cream naturally rises and floats in a golden layer at the top, the way milk looked 100 years ago. Small dairies that make it often use gentle batch pasteurization, holding the milk at just 145 degrees for 30 minutes. You shake the bottle before you pour, and that cream on top is the oldest freshness test there is. The third is grass-fed milk, Maple Hill Creamery being the one you see most often, from cows actually raised on pasture instead of a grain lot, gently pasteurized rather than blasted with heat, so what is in the glass reflects what the cow ate and little more. The color even shifts slightly, golden from the pasture, not from anything added. And the fourth is local creamery milk, often sold in returnable glass bottles, that travels days instead of months and reaches you close to the way it left the farm. By definition, these are regional, a different name in every state, but the pattern is the same. What all four share is not a marketing word, it is an absence. Nothing was pulled out, nothing was pushed back in, and nothing was rebuilt in a shape a cow would not recognize. So here is what you can do with all of this. You do not need a lab. You need 3 quick tests. First, read the exact words on the carton, because the label is legally required to confess. Ultra pasteurized, ultra filtered, reduced sugar, non-fat dry milk, vitamin A and D added. Each phrase tells you how far the milk traveled from the cow. Second, check the shelf life. Milk that keeps for 60 days or sits happily on a room temperature shelf has been heat treated far beyond the basics. Third, try to curdle a splash of it with a little lemon juice or vinegar. Standard pasteurized milk breaks cleanly into soft curds within a minute or 2. Ultra pasteurized and ultra filtered milk resist it and stay stubbornly liquid because the heat reshaped the very proteins that are supposed to come together. And if you buy a non-homogenized bottle, let it sit overnight and watch for the cream to climb to the top. The one thing no factory step can fake. None of the 7 is bad milk. They solve real problems, and some of them solve problems the plain carton cannot. The only thing worth knowing is which one you are actually holding, so that the next time you stand in that aisle in front of 30 cartons all wearing the same 4 letters, the word milk finally means something specific to you. That is the process. We reveal how things actually work, one story at a time. If there is something you would like us to explore next, let us know. Until then, trust the process.